Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
Welcome to Waiting with Love. As always, this is a fellowship style space for people navigating the messy in between that comes with waiting. Whether you're waiting for a child, as we are, or waiting for something else, we want you to know that you don't have to wait without hope, and you certainly don't have to wait alone.
This is especially true when the waiting has lasted longer, hurt more, or changed you more than you expected. If you've ever felt stuck in the middle of something you desperately wanted, you are in the right place.
Thank you for being here. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much to everyone who's been following along on Instagram, TikTok, our website, listening to the podcast. We are so grateful and humbled for everybody who has chosen to follow along with our story and our journey. There was an article that was released this week in the Cosmopolitan, which is not something, believe it or not, that Andrew and I regularly read. But I think as the algorithms have picked up and our followership, particularly in the infertility space, has increased, that caught our attention. And we thought that it would be nice to take a little bit of a break from our call it regularly scheduled programming and talk about this article because I think it's relevant and I think it speaks to a lot of what we're living and what we are experiencing being a same-sex couple trying to form a family. So I think that will be the focus of today's episode. Andrew, do you want to maybe give your overview of the article and then we can go into a little more detail?
Yes. No, I do not read the Cosmopolitan very frequently, but I think actually I saw it because the organization Men Having Babies shared it. And anyway, it was written on April 21st, 2026, by Ashley, I hope I'm not butchering her name, Orman. And it's titled The Source of Male Infertility. No one talks about being gay. So the premise of this article, and I guess before I even dive into it, a lot of what we're going to talk about today from this article, it will be interesting for a lot of you, but it mostly pertains to gay men for this one. But we'll talk more about why and all that stuff in just a moment. But basically, the premise of this article is, I hate to put it this way, but basically that gay men are infertile and we should be seen that way. And the fact that we're not seen that way by the law or by health insurance and all that good things, there are several negative impacts that we're going to talk about in just a moment. But the idea of gay men of being infertile was startling at first, but as I started processing in my head, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because when we think of infertile, I actually don't think of gay men. I think of straight couples, to be honest with you. And I think of people we actually know who try to have kids, again, the old-fashioned way, upstairs in bed, or wherever you like to do it. No judgment here. And it doesn't turn into a baby, right? There's something going on biologically. So that's what I think about when I think infertile. But the case the article was making was, well, I mean, if two gay men want to have a baby, they can't do it biologically, which makes us infertile.
Yeah, I think what stuck out to me, because I agree, Andrew. I mean, when we think about infertility, you most commonly think about female infertility, where a female has trouble either ovulating to produce a mature egg, getting pregnant, or carrying the baby. Less commonly, you think about male infertility, which would be, the quality of the male sperm. But if you think holistically at what it takes to produce a baby, you need a good quality egg, you need good quality sperm, and then you need to be someone to be able to carry the baby. And I think that this article sort of highlights that regardless of the health of individual male sperm, because same sex males and to some extent same sex females don't have those three components required to produce a baby, then the article is making an argument that that constitutes the definition of infertility, which, as you said, Andrew, is not what people generally think about. But there's some interesting points in here, and maybe where I wanted to start was on the insurance point, because many companies, including my own, offer fertility benefits for traditional couples that cover if you're meeting the traditional definition of infertility, but not for same sex couples like ourselves.
Well, before we get to insurance, which let's put a pin on that just for a moment, let's just talk about the cost of infertility, right? Because insurance makes the cost ideally, and we can talk more about that in a moment, but ideally more bearable for people. But the cost of infertility, now this is broad for anybody, right? Straight couple, gay couple, something else couple, or individuals for that matter. I mean, the cost of infertility is quite high because at that point you can't have a baby biologically, at least without intervention, at least without medical intervention. So your options are adoption. So if you want a baby, that means private adoption, which is very expensive. And if you want to have your own, that's either IVF, surrogacy, or both, like we're experiencing. So the cost you're talking about six figures potentially, especially if you're including surrogacy. And if you're trying to do IVF, if you're a woman, you may also be the same because it may require sadly, many attempts of a successful IVF cycle. So you're talking six figures, at least for a lot of us because of this. So now let's get back to insurance, right? So as you said, a lot of companies, mine offers a little something, yours offers something. A lot of companies offer fertility benefits, even some health insurance. Just regular health insurance sometimes covers different aspects of a fertility treatment. The problem, though, is how that's defined. How infertility is defined does not exactly look like me and you, based on what the article says and based on our experience.
Right. And that's where my head was going as well, is, the company that I work for offers a generous amount for fertility treatment at the point at which your traditional health coverage stops covering those treatments, but they only apply by the current definition if you have low sperm quality or female fertility issues. That particular benefit does not cover non traditional couples like ourselves. Now, there are companies out there, of which mine is one of, that have additional supplemental benefits for fertility treatments, adoption, surrogacy, and traditional fertility. But I think that what the article is getting at is an outdated definition that insurance companies are using, where people like you and I are losing out on other benefits that are available, including those through your standard healthcare.
Right, and there's a lot of area. We could take what you just said in a lot of different directions. So let's kind of break it down. So, just regular health insurance that covers fertility treatments. I don't know of any, based on my research, based on this article, that would include people like us, right? As you know, right? So some very, very progressive, generous companies like yours do offer supplemental benefits, and I don't want to discount this because it's amazing they do this, but it's reimbursement. It is, so we still have to front it, which again, don't want to take away from your company because it's amazing, and thank you. And one day we were going to out you, and thank you all, but not today. But we still have to come up with the money ourselves, right? So it's a very expensive proposition, even though hopefully we get some of it back. My company, again, offers supplemental fertility. That's a tough word. But it's only, I think it's up to $5,000, which that's very nice of them. They mean well. As anyone who, if straight, gay, whatever you are, has ever gone through infertility in the States, $5,000 doesn't get you very far. Maybe you get to a doctor's appointment. Maybe an ultrasound if you're lucky. Again, it's nice they do it, but it's not. I mean, it doesn't. It's not going to make a world of difference.
Well, and maybe just to frame that point, so $5,000. I'm thinking about our own journey. what $5,000 bought for us on our journey is signing of a contract.
Just signing, right?
Just
Right.
signing the contract
Just signing the
was
contract.
a $5,000 deposit, non-refundable. So, as you said, Andrew, like super generous, very glad that companies are offering things like this. But I think to put in perspective for our viewers, that gets your foot in the door.
So the implication for gay men, and I'm going to read this quote from the article in a second, is basically it makes having kids not realistic. Because again, most gay men don't, well, all gay men are not, based on the definition, unless a gay man can get it going down there with a woman, which they can't have kids biologically, right? So that basically means unless you are independently wealthy or have a good income or have family helping you, or you're willing to basically take out all your equity or retirement, a house or your retirement accounts, having children is not financially realistic. And this quote really startled me because we know people like this, Matt. And it goes from the article. It's the very last paragraph. What gay men have to think about, and it says this: these days, nobody says, "I'm gay, and I'm never going to have children." But what they do say, and these are people who want children, obviously, not every gay has a child, but so gay who wants a child, they're never going to say, "I'm never going to have children." What they say is, "I am not wealthy enough. I am never going to have children." And we have a good friend actually in Florida, who I'm sure you're thinking of too, who we know wants kids, and probably won't be able to. And it's horrible. It's awful that it's just money, nothing else. And we don't want to take away anything that non-gay men who struggle with fertility go through, and the cost and emotional toll and physical toll and financial toll. But the infrastructure of fertility or insurance or finances, there's nothing for us besides, again, any income we have that we've accumulated on our own. Health insurance, unless you work for one of the few very progressive companies that will refund some of your money, not front it, but refund some of your money. It basically makes having a child of your own, with your own, biological child, basically impossible. And of course, adoption, again, unless you're doing public adoption, which nothing wrong with that. But if you're doing private adoption, also makes it impossible. And so by this article's definition, it makes us infertile.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I want to touch on. You made a point that I want to make sure that we're clear on because we're trying to be an inclusive space. When you made the comment that gay men can't have biological children, I want to just clarify that you meant in the way that a straight couple would have children. And obviously that definition or that statement would exclude people, many of whom we know, who came out later in life and were at some point married to a woman, had biological children, and made the decision to come out later. So we obviously wouldn't be talking about that. We would be talking about people like you and I who got married at a young age as a same-sex couple trying to have a biological child. Where I wanted to go next, though, is this article cites an interesting lawsuit that is currently making its way through the courts, stating that the definition of infertility discriminates against gay men according to state and federal laws like Title VII, which prevents discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation. And that's an interesting one to me because this is a 2024 lawsuit. This would fundamentally change the definition of infertility in, I think, a positive way for people like you and I.
Yes, well, I want to talk about that, but should we talk about the restrictions that are in place by state first?
Sure.
Because then the court kind of hopefully solves that. So, yes. So to Matt said, there is currently a lawsuit, I think, in New York, right? That will ultimately, hopefully, start changing that definition, as Matt said. But the thing is, as everyone in America knows, every state is basically an independent country when it comes to things like these. And every state has their own regulations, unless the federal government passes a universal law, not legalizing, but defining what infertility is. But one of the interesting things about this article I found was exclusion of gay men in the definition infertility is not just the evil Republicans or the evil Christian conservatives and whatnot, but it's actually bipartisan. So you have states like, I think it was West Virginia or Arkansas. Same thing. Just kidding, not the same thing. Very different. It's Arkansas. You have the state of Arkansas, if I can find it in the article.
Yes, I know what you're talking about, where IVF coverage only comes into play if I found it here. In Arkansas, for example, IVF coverage mandates state that a patient's eggs must be fertilized with her spouse's sperm.
Right, there you go. And
it limits the definition of infertility to a traditional male and female married couple only.
And I should have prefaced this better. Why that matters is those state rules is what insurance companies in those states have to follow. Right. So obviously insurance companies, unless they're very progressive, which name me one healthcare insurance company that's very progressive, is not going to go out of their way to include coverage they don't have to include. So these state definitions matter because if the state of Arkansas says this, that's what the insurance company is going to cover. So again, Arkansas, not the bluest state in the world, not the most gay-friendly state in the world, fine. But Maryland is a dark blue state, a very gay-friendly state. We have a lot of friends in Maryland. And there, so again, bipartisan exclusion, it says same-sex spouses so that's a start, can receive IVF coverage after 3 attempts of artificial insemination over the course of 1 year, failing to result in a pregnancy. So that sounds good. All right. Basically you got to show you can't do it on your own, and then we'll cover it. There's only one problem if you're a gay man.
Right.
Most men, you know something that I don't know, most men
cannot be inseminated.
Can't be inseminated. Which means insurance companies in one of the bluest states of the country don't have to provide insurance for gay men. Now, in Maryland's defense, that does mean ideally, I think, that lesbian women are covered in Maryland, but gay men are not.
Right.
So, anyhow, you teed up the lawsuit just a moment ago in New York. Do you want to talk more about that? Because that's hopefully going to be the start to fix some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we stopped doing adoption and we decided to pursue surrogacy, it is such a long-held belief that the rules and the laws around infertility do not apply to same-sex couples. We never anticipated that insurance would be a factor or fertility benefits would be a factor. We knew from the get-go that we would be paying out of pocket and paying out of pocket heavily in order to pursue surrogacy. But where I think this article is calling out, and this lawsuit in the state of New York is hopeful, is if this goes in the favor of the plaintiffs, this would set a precedent that enables gay men across the country, I'm quoting from the article here, across the country to enjoy the same fertility coverage benefits many women and straight couples do. It would open the door that those fertility or infertility benefits that many companies provide to their employees, either through health insurance or supplemental benefits, would suddenly come into play, and you wouldn't be reliant on either paying 100% out of pocket or, to your point earlier, Andrew, the generous benefits that companies like mine, which very few do, offer specifically for adoption and surrogacy credits. So this lawsuit that's mentioned in the article would, if it goes in favor, fundamentally change the way that same-sex couples think about infertility and think about their path to parenthood. And to your previous comment about, our friend in Florida or many others out there, as the article cites, that are thinking, I can't afford to have a biological child, this would open significant doors for people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too excited about it because it's a start, obviously, absolutely. And I am definitely not a legal expert. But so this lawsuit is a class action lawsuit in New York City. Now, New York is a very blue state. New York City is the bluest part of a very blue state. I could see it succeeding there. I can. And hopefully New York will add gay men into the infertility definition, which would enable any man in New York who has health insurance, which that's a different conversation for a different day, which is a luxury. Let's be honest in this country. Would then cover infertility treatments, which would include hopefully IVF and surrogacy. Hopefully, like we know in the gay world with same-sex marriage, maybe if one state starts it, slowly but surely more states do it, and ultimately it becomes a federal thing. I mean, it just that will be slow. There's no denying it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that will be slow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, again, I'm not an expert in this case, but there will be a lot of money, especially from insurance companies that don't want this to happen. So there's going to be a lot of litigation if it ever makes it out of New York and even ever gets to the Supreme Court. I'm not feeling very optimistic about the current makeup of our Supreme Court. So, it's a start. Hopefully New York can set a precedent, and then maybe down the road we'll see. But the reality is for most gay men, this is not going to change very much outside of New York anytime soon. So one of the things I did want to talk about next, because it kind of is where it's like the most obvious place to go from this. If you're a gay man, having children is a massive luxury that most can't afford. Right? It's luxury is the right word. Mm-hmm. And Matt and I have talked about this several times. We know, despite all our troubles, despite all the podcast episodes and all the Instagram posts, while we have not been successful and we're not happy about it, we're privileged, the two of us. That we've been able to try again and try again and try again. And while we're waiting, and we're going to talk about this in an upcoming episode, we've been able to do things like travel, and we are able to, we've had to make sacrifices, but we were able. It's a luxury we've been able to participate in so far, but most can't. Most can't. And you made a comment a minute ago. We've never even operated under the assumption we could get financial help through insurance or fertility benefits, because you and I, it's almost like it's ingrained in our head that if you're a gay man, and you're not exactly, I like what you mentioned a few minutes ago, because we do know a lot of people who've had kids biologically before they came out with a woman. But if you're a gay man who's out or in a relationship or whatnot, most of us assume if we want to have kids, we're just gonna have to empty our bank accounts. It's the only way to do it. The thought never even occurred to me that no, maybe it's more complicated than that. Maybe we are infertile. Maybe there should be benefits and insurance and whatnot that other couples receive. So that is interesting. I have to really think more about that if I even agree with that, because I think it's complicated. But obviously, I agree that if there's benefits, we should get them. But we're two gay men saying we're infertile. I don't know. Does everybody agree with that? I don't know. Do our listeners agree with that? I don't know. It's interesting.
That's what I found probably the most interesting about this is, as I said a few minutes ago, it's so ingrained in the way that we think about family building as a same-sex couple. Up until this article, I never would have considered us in the category of infertility. So I think it's an interesting article. It's an interesting perspective that, as you said, Andrew, I would have to kind of noodle or think a little bit more of. It's an interesting one. We'll be waiting to see what comes out of that case in New York. As you said, these things, anything in court takes a while, and they take a while to filter through. And just because one state does it, as we talked about the examples of Virginia and Alabama or Arkansas and Maryland, they vary by state, and that's the country that we live in. So do you, I guess, taking all that into consideration, Andrew, do you feel like this is unfair, or is this just a reality of biology? And people who are against this case would say, you're not infertile because of the situation you're in. If you were in a heterosexual relationship, you wouldn't have this problem.
I don't know. That's a great question. I think what's unfair or hard or the emotional cost, I think because, and maybe this is our own fault, because we have a travel blog, because we do this, I don't think people really truly understand the financial cost this has brought on ourselves and of course other people who are doing this. You
Hmm.
know, family and both sides of the family, not blaming your side, not blaming my side, all family, wonders why we don't come and visit more often. They, wonders why, whatever, why you work so hard. Why, Matt, why do you have to travel every week? How often do you hear that from your family? You know, it costs a lot of money to do what we're doing. And, we're going to talk more about this in a future episode, but, I'm just going to say it. Visiting family is not very relaxing. This process is not very relaxing. So the few weeks of PTO we actually get, we rather cash in our miles to go somewhere relaxing. I hate to break it to you all, but that's if you're listening, that is why. Because you don't understand how much money we're spending. We're not saving as much as a lot of people our age are saving because it's either we just do nothing but try to have a baby all the time, which we are doing, but and nothing else, and then we could save more, or we try to stay sane and balance of paying to continue paying for this because we're not getting much support. Because yes, your company is going to help us down the road with some of it, not all of it, with with a percentage of it, but it's going to be refunded. So that's still money we need to come up with. Um, what keeps us sane is 2 or 3 times a year we go somewhere relaxing, or we go see our boy in France, or whatever. It's like that's what's keeping us sane right now because the financial cost of all this is astronomical. We're talking six figures.
Hmm.
Imagine that six figures in a IRA right now, compounding interest.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and I think you touched on something which is really important as well, which is the emotional aspect, which we've talked plenty about, and I'm sure we'll continue to as we're in this extended period of waiting. But there is that delicate balance of saving financially because it's a huge financial burden, but also just such an emotional burden trying to stay sane and trying to live through these periods of waiting. And I think the other element, which is probably the most frustrating, and I think you agree with this, Andrew, is the stage gate payments that one goes through in this process are certainly helpful. They break up that six figures into more digestible pieces. I don't want to say they're easy pieces, but more digestible pieces. But because of the uncertainty that comes with this process, with knowing whether or not an IVF transfer is successful, knowing whether or not you make it through certain stages of a pregnancy at which the milestone payments are based on, there's also this unknown factor of we know that we have additional payments coming up, but we don't really know when they're going to be. And I think that in and of itself adds a lot of emotional distress to a financially burdensome process.
yeah, so I think we need to wrap it up. But this article was cool. I mean, it was interesting. It was very interesting. I've
Hmm.
never thought of myself as infertile before. I know both of us need to have our semen analyzed before we started the process for surrogacy. So I guess in that regard, maybe that was like the closest time I've ever felt the word infertile, or like just that word.
Hmm.
Again, do we have a right to a baby? Does a gay man have a right to a baby? That that's also part of I guess the equation here. If the answer is yes, and then yeah, we're infertile. We can't do it on our own. We need help. And as of right now, the system is not helping us. The government is not helping us. Insurance companies are not helping us. If you are work for again, I want to make it very clear. Very few companies offer what Matt's company offers. A lot, in fact, some of the ones that do offer what sounds like reasonable benefits, if you actually double click it, there's a lot of stipulations about. Yes, we cover surrogacy, but it has to be in the United States on a Tuesday, and on a month that begins with J. Maybe it's not that ridiculous, but a lot of some of these companies that like to throw it out there that have these great benefits, if you actually look at it, you know, maybe not as great as they look, kind of thing. They're great on a pamphlet, though. So that's the thing. If we do have a right to a baby, which again it requires somebody in a black robe, not me, to decide. Yeah, the fact is we're infertile and we're not getting the benefits that other people are getting as gay men.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to stop for today. I guess to all of our listeners, if you follow us on our socials, we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? Are gay men or same-sex couples infertile? Let us know.
Let us know.
Thank you for being here. If this episode resonates with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to know that they're not alone.
You can find more about us and this community at www.waitingwithlove.com.
And links to our socials, as always, are in the show notes.
Until next time, keep waiting with love.